Hello friends, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to like and subscribe as it greatly helps out the channel and I'd really appreciate it. Enjoy!
I talked about buffering, and this helps with this next article. Love the title, by the way. Coping with an Evil World, Contextualizing the Stress Buffering Role of Scripture Reading. So, uh, chat, scripture reading is exactly what you probably think it is. Um, it should be, just kind of getting that. I think for some it's closeness, but I think it's also important to kind of distinguish is how literal do you take it. So with that, Gabe, kind of walk us through why did y'all want to look at scripture reading. Again, it's also seems to be a lesser known area when it comes to the religion research and health.
Um, yeah, so again, this was you're going to make it available. This is another paper with some wonderful colleagues doing some work. Yeah, so we just got the sense that when people turn to scripture or holy work, holy writings, on the one hand, it is a cognitive process. You're reading these words, and these words might give you a sense of peace, right? They might give you a sense of calm from reading the words. And then, as you said, it's quite possible that people select the sections of what they're reading that makes them feel good, right? The pastor or the deacon or the priest or the imam is going to guide the participants to certain readings. And so, yeah, so we got to look. I mean, at the end of the day, religion, the major world religions come to people through religious writings, right? And so we got to thinking that it's quite possible that these writings are going to have an effect on how people perceive certain aspects of their life. So really, it was that was the driving factor that got us to think about this.
Awesome. And so, how then, or what is a major reason for scripture reading being either positively or negatively associated with distress?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple. I think there's again, these mechanisms are tricky to get at, and I'm not a neuroscientist. I love that stuff,
Right.
but if you think about it, let's think on two levels. On the one hand, you have the stuff that's written, right? The things that you're reading are the things that you believe. And depending on your religious tradition, you might feel that reading the scripture is your connection to the divine. And that it's right. These are the words, God's words. So this might give you a sense of calm, a soothing sense of peacefulness from reading these words. So there's that religious aspect to it. But then it's quite possible that there's another element to this. And again, this is where I'm not a neuroscientist, but what the hell? It's worth throwing it out there. Why do people read, right? Or people. There's many reasons we read, but if you walk into any bookstore, any big bookstore, or Starbucks, you see lots of people sitting calmly, drinking their coffee or their tea, reading. The image of someone on a weekend reading, at home by the fire. I live in Connecticut where it gets cold and we love our fires and to sit by the fire and read. So there's a calming element of the practice of reading, right? Reading itself. So when you put the two together, right? When you think about the two together, the practice of reading, and then what you believe, with the beliefs that that are generated on that reading, yeah, I think that it's quite plausible that would have the type of impact that we found in this piece.
Awesome. And that kind of touches in on kind of a major aspect y'all are looking at in this article is, right, coping, right, is, that kind of peacefulness is people will result and everyone does this, to some sort of behavior when dealing with high stress. And for some, it's reading. I know a lot of people, kind of like what you're getting at, may not think of reading so much anymore because we're so glued to the internet, iPads, what have you. But is that kind of
Yeah,
something that y'all saw with this
yeah,
paper as well? This is
yeah. I
kind of
mean, I don't know
positive
if,
coping.
this one goes back a ways, and so, but I don't know if we tested directly that causal possibility. But I think that, I think that you're definitely onto something, to the extent that, um, if we think of like self-help literature, right? We think of all the self-help literature that's out there. We think of all of, there's a whole industry of literature that is designed to sort of empower people, right? Young people on Instagram and social media do the, um, um, be a better version of myself, right? The better version of myself. I see that on my Instagram account a lot. Oh, and by the yes, I do have Instagram. I do have Facebook. You're welcome to join. There's nothing tawdry on there, but I actually do tend to often post a lot of my research and a lot of the academic activities that I'm involved with. But yeah, so I think along those lines, if we think of if we think of scriptural reading along those lines, it could be a similar process, right? Particularly when it comes to coping. Coping is the kind of defense mechanism that helps us deal with the difficulties of life. And so if there's a whole industry of literature, secular, not all of it secular, helping us cope, then it's quite plausible that religious writings are going to have that same effect. I think to someone like Joel Osteen, the young minister from Houston, from Texas, from Houston, who has a very successful publishing enterprise, and it's partly a kind of a prosperity gospel, but it's also a bit of a coping gospel. A lot of what he talks about is how to deal with adversity and how to cope with the difficulties of life. And so, yeah, so I think you might be onto something to the extent that reading and immersing yourself in this kind of literature would have that effect. Now, I think you have a follow-up question, about a pessimistic attitude. So let me just jump ahead of you and just get it out there and say that starts to take us back to the dark side, right? A bit of the dark side of religion. If we're to expect that reading certain things is going to have a sort of a positive effect, what we might call a positive effect in terms of helping us cope, well, we have to be prepared for the opposite, that reading other things is going to have a negative effect, right? And I would absolutely say that that's a strong possibility. Depending on what the person is reading, depending on what they're focusing on, these religious texts, the Bible, are extremely complex socio-historical documents that have all kinds of messages. And so while there's lots of stuff in the Bible written specifically to make people happy, there's a lot of stuff in there that'll make you sad, and there's a lot of stuff in there that can make you angry. And so I think depending on what people are choosing and selecting, it might have the effect of leading to more sort of pessimistic outcomes.
Wow, good. I mean, not good, but
Yeah.
good to know, right? It's
Yep.
and this does get into chat. I know you're kind of thinking or wondering, but yes, there are also negative coping behaviors, like the aforementioned drinking and smoking technically are oftentimes viewed as negative coping behaviors because they negatively affect your health. And yes, I think, Gabe, you hit it on the head. It's attitudes, how you take, what the reading is. And this is why I always warn, my students, when you're looking at social media, if you're already upset, nothing on there is probably going to make you happy, right? Because, especially if you're following all these political posts, especially as we approach midterms, right? There's a reason these ads invoke certain sorts of, feelings, emotions, and reading, I feel, can fall into that as well, right? It's like if there's a passage, a line you don't agree with, so I think that's, yeah, a very fair point. I think it's important to address. So fantastic. Thank you.